What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. Tonight, we're going to talk about starting to face off with our self-hate and see what we can do to turn that around. So, Michael, I will turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. It's great to be with you. I just love this group. I love you all. It's so good to be here. So, when Bill Wilson was talking about emotional dependence, I think what he was talking about was depending on other people to feed him so that he could feel lovable. And really what in my language and way of thinking about this, it's really the self-hatred is really a manifestation of the love wound, a woundedness to our sense of our lovability. So I'd like to talk today about 4 different ways that we can practice this basically for healing the love wound and healing our self-hatred, and then sort of finish that off with a little bit of a meditation visualization practice that I'd like to share with you that I think is very, very powerful for healing the love wound and self-hatred. And then I'll sort of summarize by sort of weaving this together a little bit. So I'll spend some time talking, and then if it's okay with you, I'd like to guide you through a little meditation visualization practice. So I can think of 4 different practices for healing the love wound and healing self-hatred. And the first that I want to mention is the practice of kind awareness. And this really comes out of sort of the self-compassion literature, Kristen Neff and her work, and Chris Germer. And the idea of this is to really, first of all, to really practice mindfulness and presence. Because if you're lost in your experience, it's hard we lose our awareness of our experience when we're lost in it. And the way to be aware, I think that awareness is profoundly healing and profoundly corrective. So the practice of mindful presence throughout the day is really, really, really critical for healing our self-hatred and just for basically to be aware so that we're seeing our experience rather than just being our experience. But we want to then take, and when self-hatred arises, and it can manifest as, self-critical thoughts like, I'm such an idiot, or, oh God, that was so stupid, or I'm such an asshole. And those kinds of harsh self-critical thoughts or feelings of brokenness or emptiness. Here's the practice. The practice is that when you see that, be very vigilant for the arising of it. And the other thing to really attend to be very attending to very carefully is the arisement of negative judgments, condemnation, negative judgments and condemnation. Be very vigilant for the arising of these manifestations of the love wound. And when they come up, what you do is you greet them with kindness. So the way that Chris and Neff talks about this and others, Chris Germer and others, is you kind of, when the pain comes up, you sort of go, oh, buddy, I'm sorry. Oh boy. Or you could say, oh, honey, whatever you just say something like, oh, you just greet yourself and your experience, your pain, the pain of the love wound of the self-hatred. You counter it with kindness. And with time and practice, what we do is we eventually develop this capacity for the intentional practice of kind awareness, or what I call appreciative attending, in kind of the model that I use in my work. So we're basically showing, we're being our own ideal parent in a way, our own ideal loving parent, and showing us the kindness that maybe we didn't get when we were growing up. And that way we can really on the spot counter the negative, painful feelings, and sort of, we can't, I don't think the brain deletes, so we can't really undo in a way. I'm not sure that we can really undo totally the core damage of trauma and neglect that we had, but we can definitely develop compensatory neural structures. And this practice of kind awareness is one of these practices. Lannon and Amiri, in their book, A General Theory of Love, talk about, they use the language of limbic revision, revising our emotional relational system, which is rooted in our emotional limbic system, and revising that. So this practice of mindful kind awareness is one very key and very effective, outcome effective, evidence-based, proven practice for reversing self-hatred. The next practice I'd like to mention is really getting into relationships with loving people who we can then, if we will, borrow the love of others. We can't really permanently borrow the love of others, because ultimately it's our job to figure out a way to love ourselves and to heal our own love wound and to manage our sense of our lovability. But I think if we're very wounded or traumatized, I think working with a therapist or a sponsor or other really, really loving people can be very helpful, especially if we get into a relationship where we can be very authentic and very transparent and be safe and not be judged. That's so critical, because when we're with somebody who doesn't judge us and accepts us for who we are, and ideally like a sponsor where we share our step 5 of all the our moral inventory, and we are not judged, or with a therapist when we share transparently what's going on for us, and we experience their, as Carl Rogers talked about, unconditional positive regard, or their love for us, or their affirmation of us, and their reverence of us, if you will, in that transparent, authentic relationship. Then what Lannon and Mary talk about is this, what we develop is what's called limbic resonance. We develop limbic resonance. And a lot of psychotherapy, and I think healing relationships, are about creating loving limbic resonance. And then in the context of that limbic resonance, leading to what, again, is limbic revision, which is what this is all about, healing self-hatred through limbic revision. So that's the second practice for healing self-hatred. The third practice, and this one's tricky, is the practice of love. And I'll say why it's tricky. It turns out that there's this virtuous resonance between doing good and feeling good. The more lovable, the more loving we act, in general, the more loving we feel. But there's a caveat to this. And here's the caveat. It really only works if our intentions are pure. In other words, and this is a paradox, but if we love for love's sake alone, if we love for love's sake alone, just for the inherent fulfillment of loving, if we love purely, then we feel more lovable. And you can just look at your own experience and notice that to be true. So that is another practice that's really, I think, very important, is to start each day with an intention to love. Because every day that we spend in a day of loving as purely as we can, not to get something from somebody, and not really, here's the paradox, is not to feel lovable, really. Not to love but to thinking that, okay, if I live a virtuous life and if I do all these good things, then that will make me lovable. No, you are lovable as you are. This is the paradox of it. That's why I'm almost hesitant to say this, because it's very tricky. You really have to be pure in your intentions. Otherwise, you fall into the trap of what I call social narcissism, which is the idea of you're just doing all these great things for the world, and then that's going to make you into this great person who everybody admires. And it's kind of a subtle form of what Alan writes about and talks about. And Dr. Horney talked about sort of the hero solution to securing our lovability through external praise and admiration, because we're just so wonderful. You really want to be careful to avoid that trap. But I do think that loving purely for love's sake alone is profoundly healing, profoundly healing. And it's a paradox, because then that leads to then a feeling more lovable, which then, and the more lovable you feel, the less self-hatred you feel, the less self-preoccupied you are, and the less compelled you are, or hobbled, to use Bill Wilson's phrase, to kind of be addicted to then trying to secure your lovability from external sources, right? The more lovable you feel, the less compelled you feel to then compulsively try and secure your lovability from external sources. So this loving for love's sake alone is sort of the third practice. And then the fourth practice, which we'll do now, and I'll walk you through a guided meditation with your permission. Again, if you don't feel comfortable participating, then please don't. But for those of you who do feel comfortable, I invite you to let me walk you through this guided meditation. Is the power of visualization. Visualization is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly powerful, and it is a powerful agent for healing, and for healing the loved one, as I'm going to show you in this practice. Now, these meditative visualization practices that I'm going to be sharing talk about evidence-based. These practices go back 2,000 years. I mean, these are the most evidence-based practices we have in all of humanity in terms of the field of psychology. And they go back, to ancient Tibetan traditions that I'm going to be sharing with you. So these are very, very solid, very, very proven, and very, very powerful. Now, here's the trick with these practices, though. They don't work overnight. It can sometimes take months to really notice a benefit. So it really takes patience and perseverance and consistency. Using this process of limbic revision, of healing self-hatred with these meditation visualization practices, really take a consistent, committed, disciplined, daily effort, if possible, ideally daily effort. I would recommend 15 minutes every morning at a minimum for this practice. And you will notice, though, I mean, when I started doing these practices, I noticed the benefit within 3 months. I really did. And I continue to do these practices every day. And I continue to experience more and more benefit from this practice I'm going to be teaching you. So these practices are on my website in the meditation section on my website. And I'm going to combine 3 practices into one. The first one is a practice of presence, which is really the foundation that one needs for these meditative visualization practices to work. And the second is the practice of what's called a benefactor meditation that I first learned from John McCransky in his book, Awakening Through Love. Excellent book, I highly recommend it. And then the third is a practice of what's called Tong Len. And Tong Len is a practice it's literally giving, receiving, and it's a way of basically metabolizing self-hatred and emotional pain. So if you're ready, I invite you to get yourself comfortable. It's good to get into a comfortable, erect position, relaxed, both feet on the floor, really grounded and balanced on your hips, and just as much relaxed as you can. Maybe let you shake your shoulders out if you want to. And just, if you feel comfortable, either look down or close your eyes. And we want to get present by focusing on an anchor of attention. And generally the one that's almost always used, it doesn't have to be the one that we use, but is the breath. Usually focusing on the breath is a very good anchor. So you can just breathe in, notice that you're breathing in, breathe out, pay attention to the sensation of the breath going out. Breathe in, notice the breath going in. And then in your peripheral awareness, you can notice things like the sensation of your butt on the seat, or notice my voice, or notice the sensation of your hands, maybe some tingling in your hands, or notice any emotions or thoughts that are arising. But then focusing your attention back again, returning your attention over and over again to the breath, back to the breath over and over again. So I'll do that for a few breaths. And see if you can come into the center of your experience. See how much you can come into being the awareness of your breath. Notice the awareness of the breath. Notice your awareness of all the other experiences, my voice, sensations, other sounds, thoughts, feelings. Be the witness of them as much as you can. Your mind is you're going to get lost in thought, and your attention is going to get drowned in thought over and over again. And that's okay. When that happens, note it. Just return back to the breath over and over again. And in that context of being present, the next practice is what's called the benefactor practice. And in that practice, I want you to visualize in front of you people who benefited you. Maybe not perfectly, but people who wanted well for you and wished you well and maybe have benefited you. It could be parents, even imperfect as they were perhaps, or family members, or teachers, or mentors, or coaches, your spouse, partner, friends, past and present. Anybody who in some ways wished you well and benefited you, supported you, cared for you, helped you out in some way. And imagine them surrounding you in a ring. And as you do this more and more over time, you'll think of more and more people, and your gratitude and appreciation will grow for how many people really have benefited you over the years. But for now, you may just think of a few people, and that's okay. And imagine them smiling at you. Imagine them beaming love into your heart. Imagine them beaming love into your heart. Imagine a small, faint, maybe glowing ball of love, a white ball of love in your heart. And then you can imagine other benefactors. You can imagine maybe great people, the great loving people that you have known, or maybe great spiritual figures or divine figures. You can even imagine God or source or spirit or a divine loving energy. All of these benefactors can work for this, and you might want to combine them. Do what feels right and best for you and play around with it over time. You might imagine Jesus Christ or Muhammad or the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa or anybody who you see as a great loving figure. You might even imagine your parents without their faults and flaws. You might imagine them with just beaming on you, just loving on you. Just imagine all these people loving on you. All these people just beaming you love. And imagine that love filling your heart, slowly filling your heart with a glowing ball of love. Imagine it growing and growing and growing. And the more you do this over time, the more powerful this becomes. If you're not noticing much or not able to visualize very much right now, that's okay. That's okay. Don't criticize yourself. Don't judge. This is a capacity that can be developed with practice. Just imagine the beaming this love into your heart, and your heart turning into a radiating, glowing ball of love. Now, for the third phase of this, you might do this for maybe 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 or 15 minutes, 5 to 15 minutes. For the third phase of this, imagine all your benefactors now moving from in front of you to behind you, and still beaming love into your heart from behind. Now they've literally got your back. They've got your back. And now you face forward into the world with your loving benefactors, beaming love into your heart as you face out into the world. And you want to begin by first imagining maybe your own emotional pain, your own self-hatred. Imagine those harsh, negative, self-critical thoughts. You know, many of my patients experience a sense of brokenness or deep, profound, almost a pre-verbal unworthiness, or harsh self-criticism, or just shame. Shame is another way that this manifests, or a feeling of brokenness or emptiness. And just imagine that pain. And imagine breathing in that self-hatred as black, imagine as black smoke. And imagine breathing that black, smoky self-hatred right into the center of your glowing heart and having it being converted to bright, loving light and breathing out bright, loving light. So you breathe in the black, smoky pain and then breathe out white, loving light. Breathe in black, smoky pain, convert it in your glowing heart, and breathe out white, loving light. Any pain you might feel, it doesn't have to be self-hatred. It could be anxiety, fear. It could be anger. It could be doubt. It could be sadness. It could be regret, remorse, guilt. Any kind of emotional pain at any time. You have this radiating, glowing ball of love, which is being fueled by your benefactors from behind you. And then breathing into that black, smoky pain, converting it and breathing out love. Now with time, maybe after a day or a week or a month or maybe a year, at some point, when you feel that you've really learned to metabolize and counter some of your own grief and sorrow and self-hatred and pain, you can then work on breathing in the pain of other people. You can combine this with breathing in the pain of others when you're ready. And you can breathe in their pain and send out love to them, convert it to love and send it out to them. You can breathe in their pain and send out love to them. And ultimately, you can do this for people you know. You can do it for people you don't know well. You can do it for groups of people. I think a more advanced practice as you get along into this is to do it for people you don't like, or people who have hurt you, or that you feel animosity towards. It's a great way to practice sort of a healing form of forgiveness. And ultimately to cultivate universal love and compassion. So, when you're ready, this is very, very quick. Our time is short today. But when you're ready, you can open your eyes and we can come back to each other. And I just want to I want you to take 30 seconds or so to make just a couple of other comments. And what I want to comment on is that apart from these visualization practices, which are very powerful, you'll see that every one of the 4 practices I mentioned, mindful kindness, really developing loving connections where we're transparent and authentic and borrow the love of others, acting with love, purifying our intentions and living a life of love. And then this practice as well, to a lesser degree. But where do we see those practices? Where do we see ourselves practicing these practices? We see them in the 12 steps. We see them in the work Alan and Roger and Tom are doing and teaching. They're woven right into this brilliant invention of the 12 steps. And I really want to point that out, that it's all woven in there. And you've been probably doing these all to some degree, perhaps, and maybe consciously, maybe unconsciously, but they're all kind of there. So with that, I'll conclude this and to thank you for the opportunity to share this with you.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved, the forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. The first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. We're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.